Number 55. Curtis Eccleston. In February 2011, an Air Force technical agent named Curtis Eccleston was killed by an unknown attacker inside his own home. Eccleston's friend and fellow serviceman visited his apartment in Okinawa, Japan, after failing to hear from him for an extended period. The friend was able to enter after finding that the front door was unlocked. However, he had not anticipated walking into a horror scene. The police were called, and along with them, NCIS became involved. According to several officers that visited the crime scene, it was one of the most gruesome scenes they had seen in their careers. It was obvious that whoever was responsible for this attack did so with hate and aggression. After assessing the crime scene, investigators sought possible witnesses and broadened their search for evidence, as is common in murder and disappearance cases. The first person questioned was Eccleston's spouse, his wife Barbara. Apparently her friends and family also had a hard time trying to contact her the day of his death. There were concerns that she was potentially home at the time of the attack and had been kidnapped, or her body had been dumped elsewhere by the murderer. She was difficult to track down, but investigators finally got in contact with her and told her what had happened to her husband. While investigators were busy with Barbara, Eccleston's remains were sent in for an autopsy. The medical examiner was able to piece together what most likely happened to the victim. It appeared as though he was attacked in the kitchen by a killer wielding a large knife. Eventually, he was overcome and fell to the ground. However, the brutal attack did not stop there. When investigators relayed all of this to Barbara, she showed no signs of surprise or confusion. Eccleston and Barbara were on the verge of divorce after she was caught having an affair. When questioned, Barbara stated that she was concerned Eccleston had been murdered because he had been involved in drug trafficking. Large sums of cash and baggies of assorted drugs were hidden throughout the house, she claimed. Investigators followed up on such reports but found no traces of those items in their home. There was also no other evidence, witnesses, or even rumors to back up what the widow was reporting. Though Barbara seemed a likely suspect, there was simply not enough evidence to take her to trial, and the murder of Eccleston remains officially unsolved. Number 54. The Springfield Three. 19-year-old Suzanne Streeter and 18-year-old Stacy McCall's graduation day from Kickapoo High School in Springfield, Missouri, was filled with anticipation and excitement as they eagerly planned to celebrate their milestone achievement together. The two blonde best friends had big plans for the night. They were planning to attend multiple graduation parties with classmates. The following day, they were set to embark on a thrilling adventure to a water park, joined by a group of friends and fellow graduates. However, fate had something different in mind for Suzanne and Stacy. As the evening went on, the duo made their way to their friend Janelle Kirby's house, where further celebrations were happening. They were originally planning to stay the night there, but around 2 a.m., the girls realized that Janelle didn't really have the room for them and decided to return to Suzanne's house to sleep before they all reunited the next day. The next morning, when Suzanne and Stacy failed to show up at Janelle's house for a ride to the water park, concern quickly set in. Janelle and her boyfriend drove over to the house Suzanne shared with her mother, 47-year-old Cheryl Levitt. But as they arrived, an eerie scene awaited them. They quickly noticed that the front porch light was broken, with shattered glass scattered across the porch. Curiously, only the globe encasing the bulb was damaged, leaving the bulb itself intact. Janelle's boyfriend Mike swept up the glass, thinking nothing more of it. It was only after the fact that investigators realized that this kind gesture may have, in fact, destroyed important evidence. In front of the house, they noticed the cars of all three women parked, but something caught their attention. Suzanne's car, which she usually parked in the same spot every day, was pulled up elsewhere. This raised questions. Had someone else been parked there when Suzanne and Stacy arrived, preventing Suzanne from parking in her usual space? Inside the house, a strange and unsettling emptiness greeted them. The front door stood unlocked, yet Suzanne, Stacy, and Cheryl were nowhere to be found. All they saw were the women's purses and Cheryl's dog Cinnamon, who seemed agitated. Janelle assumed they had just missed Suzanne, Stacy, and Cheryl, believing that they had already left for the water park. However, as they were about to leave, an unexpected phone call interrupted the silence. Janelle answered, and the male voice on the other end made lewd remarks before Janelle hung up the phone. The same caller tried again, making innuendos over the line before Janelle once again hung up in disgust. Hoping that the three had already headed out for the water park, Janelle and her boyfriend left, believing that they would reunite with their friends in a few hours and still enjoy the day's activities together. However, when there was no sign of them, Janelle became even more worried. Stacy's mom, Janice, became worried when she had also not heard from her daughter and ended up heading to Suzanne and Cheryl's home to look for her. When she realized her daughter's car was parked out front, she went to the house to investigate. While there, she realized that the clothes her daughter had been wearing the night before were neatly folded in the home. She also saw that there was a new message on the answering machine, and playing it back said that it was a strange message. However, in listening to it, it was inadvertently erased. Investigators do not believe that it was linked to the calls that Janelle had received while she was in the home. McCall's parents contacted police while they were still at Suzanne and Cheryl's home, and an extensive investigation was launched. Search efforts expanded across the area, with divers, police dogs, and the FBI joining the search. Despite the collective efforts and media attention, each promising lead seemed to lead to yet another dead end, leaving investigators and loved ones in a state of frustrating uncertainty. Amidst the frenzy of media coverage, the case captured the hearts of the public, with daily updates broadcast in the days following their disappearance. The community yearned for a resolution, for any clue that could unravel the mystery surrounding Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt. Multiple suspects, including Suzanne's ex-boyfriend and a neighbor, were considered but ultimately cleared due to insufficient evidence. A witness's account of a green van with a blonde woman visible inside provided a glimmer of hope, but it too failed to yield concrete results. Years passed, and the case went cold, leaving the once vibrant hopes for resolution dimmed by the passage of time. Even a 2007 tip that prompted ground-penetrating radar scans of a parking garage offered no conclusive breakthrough. Now, more than 3 decades later, the Springfield Three's disappearance remains a haunting enigma, a tragic tale of lives seemingly swallowed by the void. The memories of Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt endure in the hearts of their loved ones, forever etched in the minds of a community that refuses to forget. The quest for answers continues, with the hope that one day, the truth behind their inexplicable vanishing will finally come to light. The case remains open to this day, and anyone with information into the disappearance of Suzanne, Stacy, and Cheryl can contact the Springfield Police Department at 417-864-1751 or the FBI VICAP at 800-634-4097. Number 53, Karen Denise Wells. Nearly 3 decades ago, in April 1994, a woman named Karen Denise Wells set out on a solo road trip to visit a childhood friend that apparently needed help and support during a trying time in her life. Wells was 24 years old at the time and was a single mother of a 14-month-old son. Her family described her as hardworking and a wonderful mother. Despite setbacks she had faced, she always made sure she had a stable income and that her son was living a healthy and happy life. Apparently, Wells had worked several jobs in which she had to travel long distances. So, when she informed her mother that she was embarking on a road trip from Haskell, Oklahoma to Bergen, New Jersey, there was no doubt that she was ready for the road. Still, a trip that long while traveling alone was understandably a potential cause for concern, so her family requested that she keep in touch as much as she could. Over the years, the details have shifted about Wells' route to her destination. Apparently, she got lost on the highway at one point and pulled off the main road. Although many small towns were easily accessible near the highways, Wells decided to travel a bit further from her original route for reasons unknown. She ended up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and checked into the Pike Hotel. From there, Wells called the friend she was heading to see around 7 p.m. She informed her friend, Melissa Shepard, that she was exhausted after traveling for about 48 hours with no sleep. All she wanted to do was cruise in her rental car to get some fast food before she would return to her room. Shepard offered to travel the few extra hours to meet Wells. She estimated that she would arrive around midnight. Shortly after this call, Wells visited the front desk for directions to McDonald's. She then left and was never seen again. Around midnight that night, just as she predicted, Shepard arrived at the hotel. She couldn't get Wells to open her hotel room door or answer the phone. She searched the parking lot, and when she didn't see Wells's rental car, she requested that the front desk let her into the room. Once inside, Shepard found that all of Wells's belongings were stacked up in a corner, and the bed had not been even slightly used. She immediately reported Wells as missing, and a search was conducted the next day. Just a few hours into the investigation, someone reported a car abandoned along the highway near the hotel. It turned out to be Wells's vehicle. Both doors were open, and the car was covered in mud and scratches, despite being nowhere near the wilderness or dirt paths. The car had run out of gas. Food was thrown all over the inside, but it's unclear if this had taken place the night of Wells's disappearance. A small amount of marijuana was found on the floorboards, and officers suspected that other drugs may have been used inside the vehicle. Various fingerprints were discovered but could not be matched to anyone. A massive search was opened, but no further evidence was ever found.
Tired of the mainstream traffic networks? There's a world beyond Facebook, Google, and TikTok ads. I'm Adam Charrington, and I'll show you how to access it. Hi there, I'm Adam Charrington, founder and CEO of...
The search was eventually called off, but the case was left open. Later that same year, around the holidays, the wife of Wells's former boyfriend reported to police that she received a call from Wells, in which she informed her that she moved out of state, got married, and was never returning home. No record of this phone call could be found. Investigators believe it was a false tip used to help the former boyfriend move on and stop grieving. Since then, nothing new has been uncovered in relation to this case, and Wells's whereabouts remain unknown. Number 52, Charles Morgan. The case of Charles Morgan is one of the most mysterious out there. He went missing almost 5 decades ago, and not for the first time. Though his body was eventually found, what happened to him remains a mystery. 39-year-old Charles Curtis Morgan was a businessman in Tucson, Arizona. Known as Chuck the Friends, he had his own escrow company and was a proud husband and father to 2 young girls. But Chuck's business life had been going a little off track. He was involved in a land fraud case as a witness to testify against a well-known crime boss. Although he would have rather kept himself out of the mess, he knew he needed to say his piece to help the case progress. On March 22, 1977, Chuck left his house to drop his daughters off at school for the day. His wife waited for him to arrive back home in the evening as usual, but he never showed. Worried, his family contacted the police and they searched for Chuck, thinking he had gone missing. But 3 days later, Chuck found his way home. He only had on one shoe, had plastic handcuffs on his ankle, and his hands were tied with a zip tie. Chuck couldn't speak, but he wrote down to his wife that he was kidnapped, and he wrote that inside his throat was a hallucinogenic drug, and he would die if he swallowed. Then he asked his wife to move his car out of sight from the street so they would not know he had returned home, but who they were remained a mystery to her. Chuck told his wife she would not call the police, and for the next week, she had to nurse him back to health. When his voice returned, Chuck told his wife about an apparent secret identity. According to him, he was a federal agent and claimed he had escaped from his kidnappers somewhere close to Phoenix's Sky Harbor Airport. After returning to normal health, Chuck was extremely paranoid. He wore a bulletproof vest, grew a beard to hide his face, and never let his daughters walk to or from school on their own. On June 7th, Chuck disappeared again, this time for longer. For days and weeks no one heard from him, and his family kept hoping he would turn up like the first time. But he never did. Chuck's father did come forward to say his son told him he wrote a letter that was only to be opened if he was ever kidnapped again, outlining who was behind it. But at the time of his final disappearance, the letter could not be located. 9 days after his disappearance, an unidentified woman called Chuck's wife and said, "Chuck is all right," Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, which reference to the Bible passage that reads, "Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road." Only 2 days after disappearing, Chuck was found shot and killed, still wearing his bulletproof vest. He was found 30 feet into the desert, just off the highway. The gun had no fingerprints, but there was gunshot residue on his left hand. In his car was a note in his handwriting outlining the location of the scene, weapons, ammunition, and one of his own teeth wrapped in a handkerchief. There was also a pair of sunglasses that his wife claimed were not his. Strangely, there was also a $2 note clipped to his underwear, and written on it were 7 Spanish names and Ecclesiastes 12, another series of Bible verses. 2 days after his death, a woman called the Pima County Sheriff's Department, claiming she had been to meet him at a motel shortly before he died, and also claimed to be the woman who called Chuck's wife days earlier. According to this woman, Chuck let her see a briefcase of money days before his death, and said this was going to get him out of a contract with the gang. Despite the paranoia displayed by Chuck and all the odd events taking place in his life before his death, there is still no conclusion about how Chuck died, or even whether his death was or the work of another. Number 51. The Hornet Spook Light. In 1936, reports began to flood into local law enforcement and media publications of a strange light being that had been sighted near the border between Missouri and Oklahoma. These occurrences took place a few miles west of Hornet, Missouri. Therefore, the light was named the Hornet Spook Light, or more simply, the Spook Light. The 1936 sightings were the first officially recorded reports of the sightings, but the history might date back as far as the 1830s. Back then, reports of the flash were shared by word of mouth, warning wanderers to stay away from the light. Some versions of those stories reported that 2 young Native American men were walking along what is now a wooded path when they were hunted down and attacked, and it is their ghosts or spirits that can be seen casting the mysterious light. However, these early stories cannot be confirmed. In the early 1940s, just a few years after the first documented reports, residents of the area and surrounding towns began to advocate that local and federal government agencies provide more funding and resources towards studying the light. This was because sightings were experienced in other areas of town, including near hiking trails and over farmlands. Residents were worried that the strange light might be dangerous.
How old is this girl? This girl. This girl is 45. So yes, this is 45 and my body can do things today I could not even dream of as a child. I became a contortionist in 3.5 months past.
And even evidence of supernatural or extraterrestrial presence. Finally, after countless letters, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers visited the town and planned out an investigation. Despite months of work, the professionals failed to come any closer to solving the mystery and providing answers. The spook light is described as a large ball or orb that hovers above the tree lines, moving very slowly. The light has most commonly been described as yellow, red, and orange, but there are a handful of accounts in which witnesses describe the light as a bright green or deep blue. Another intriguing detail about the light is that, according to some, you must remain completely silent while waiting to see the show, because apparently excessive noise of any kind will scare off the spectacle. Most reports are similar in detail, which some say disproves the assumption that people are just imagining the mysterious lights. However, most skeptics believe that the spook light is actually the reflection of distant car headlights. Number 50. Jessica Chambers. To this day, 9 years after a young woman was killed, her family is still holding out hope that justice will be served. Jessica Chambers from Portland, Mississippi was only 19 years old when her life was stolen from her. It's hard enough to lose a loved one at all, but knowing the details of Chambers' suffering in her last hours of life was more than enough to shatter the hearts of those that knew and loved her. Chambers had a history of drug use, and around the age of 17 she began spending time with gang members. She met her then boyfriend, who was about 10 years older than her, hanging out with this crowd. That same year, her brother lost his life in a car accident, which caused her to spiral more deeply into self-destructive behaviors. As far as her loved ones knew, she was clean off the drugs, and at the time of her disappearance, her boyfriend was also serving a prison sentence when she disappeared. At the age of 19, the former cheerleader and social butterfly was in recovery, working an honest job, and trying to build towards her future. Although her family was against the idea, she still hung out with friends from her drug use days, and she remained committed to her boyfriend, patiently awaiting his release from prison. Because of the crowd Chambers spent her time with, she often met questionable people. After her death, investigators started to build a timeline of Chambers' whereabouts throughout the day before her disappearance and death. In an official statement, Chambers' mother shared that on Saturday, December 6, 2014, Her daughter woke up earlier than usual to meet friends for a day of fun. She was gone for several hours, and when she came home, she seemed stressed and tired, according to her mother. Chambers headed directly to her room where she laid down for a nap. She was apparently woken up by a call from her friends that evening at 5 p.m., after which she headed out without telling her mom her plans. This behavior was not unusual for Chambers, and considering the fact she was a legal adult, her mom felt she couldn't do much about it. CCTV was later found that showed Chambers at a gas station. It seemed that she was alone at this time, but it's difficult to confirm because the camera angle made it impossible to see whether or not someone was in the car with her. It was later revealed, thanks to Chambers' cell phone's GPS data, that she arrived back in Cortland around 6 p.m. At that time, she called her mom to say she would be home soon. She seemed to be uncomfortable and uninterested in talking very much, though. Some time passed as Chambers' mother awaited the arrival of her daughter. Sadly, the young girl never made it home. Around 8 p.m., police were called to the scene where a car had run off the road and was engulfed in flames. The driver, Chambers, had managed to escape the vehicle, but she was badly burnt and had collapsed to the ground. In her last words, she said something that officers said sounded like Eric or Derek, but because of the extent of her injuries, it was very hard to distinguish her words. Though this was initially seen as vital evidence in whatever had taken place that night, nothing ever came of it. Chambers passed after arriving at the hospital. Autopsy reports and crime scene evidence showed that the victim had been attacked, and gasoline had been in her throat and sprayed all over her car before it was set ablaze. Investigators eventually found, through her cell phone, that the victim had most recently been in contact with a drug dealer named Quentin Tellis. In fact, GPS data showed they had been at the same location for a long period of time the night Chambers died. This man was brought in as a suspect and was charged with causing the woman's death during 2 different trials. However, a lack of evidence and destroyed cell phone data caused both attempts to be ruled as a mistrial. Quentin was freed from the spotlight as the suspect, but Chambers' family still believes he was responsible for the attack against their loved one, and still hold out hope that justice may one day be served. Number 49. The murder of Eliza Sherman. Eliza Sin was born in Cleveland, Ohio, to parents who emigrated to America after fleeing the Holocaust in Europe. She grew into a caring and beautiful young woman, connected to her family's Jewish faith, and fueled by a desire to help others, began attending nursing school. While studying there, she met Sanford Sherman and quickly fell in love. However, things were not perfect for long. After starting a family, Sanford began to show a different side of his personality. He was mean and controlling and had extramarital affairs. In 2011, Eliza decided to divorce Sanford to seek a better life for her and her children. The divorce process was difficult, and she faced financial and legal challenges. Eliza hired a prominent attorney, Joe Stafford from Stafford & Stafford Law Firm, on the recommendation of a close friend who'd had him handle his own divorce case. Known for handling high-profile divorce cases, the firm's reputation appealed to Eliza, who believed it would provide an advantage in her situation. Shortly after receiving the divorce papers from Eliza, Sanford retaliated by filing a complaint against her. Throughout this, he continued to pressure Eliza to attend counseling and give their marriage another shot, but she stood firm. Eliza confided in her lawyer, expressing her belief that Sanford's attempts were merely manipulative tactics and that he would not change his controlling and abusive behavior. Both Eliza and Sanford were reluctant to leave their shared home, fearing that it could be viewed as abandonment in court proceedings. As a result, Eliza moved into a downstairs bedroom, attempting to create some space between them. Feeling increasingly unsafe, Eliza began documenting her concerns in emails sent to herself. In one chilling message from January 2012, she expressed genuine fear, writing, "I'm really afraid he is going to have me killed." Despite friends offering her a safe haven in their homes until the situation was resolved, Eliza declined their offers. Instead, she took other precautions to ensure her safety, installing a deadbolt on her bedroom door to lock it at night. Things took another turn in March 2012, when Joe Stafford's law license was suspended for a year due to his actions during another case. As a result, Eliza's case was transferred to Gregory Moore, a senior associate in the firm, to move forward with the divorce proceedings. On March 26, 2013, Eliza planned to meet Gregory at the Stafford & Stafford offices. She messaged her daughter Jennifer to inform her of her plans. However, Jennifer was engrossed in a long study session and had silenced her phone, causing her to miss the message for hours. Before heading to Moore's office, Eliza also contacted her childhood friend Jan Lash to let her know about the meeting. Jan offered to accompany Eliza, but she declined, expressing her confidence that she could handle the meeting on her own. Arriving at her lawyer's office at 55 Airy View Plaza around 5:30 p.m., Eliza carried a box of requested documents. To her dismay, she found the building door locked. Frustrated, she texted Moore and waited downstairs for him to let her in. Moore assured her he would be down soon. Eliza sent Moore another message after a short while, this time citing the cold and her decision to wait in her car. Moore replied and said he would be there soon, but their scheduled meeting never came. A few minutes after the messages were exchanged, Eliza was viciously attacked by an unidentified assailant who sneaked up behind her and hit her 11 times, 8 times in the back, twice in the neck, and once in the arm. Despite the man's desperate efforts to aid her, Eliza's strength waned, and she eventually lay down on the sidewalk. Paramedics, alerted by the 911 call, arrived promptly, but tragically, Eliza was pronounced dead at Metro Health Medical Center at 6:14 p.m. The police immediately launched a thorough investigation to find her killer. The first crucial piece of evidence was CCTV footage captured near the crime scene. The footage showed a hooded man with a noticeable limp running away from the area shortly after the attack. This individual was wearing jeans and a green jacket. Despite releasing the CCTV footage to the public and conducting extensive interviews, no significant leads emerged in the initial stages of the investigation. The police faced the daunting task of connecting the dots between Eliza's troubled marriage, the messy divorce proceedings, and the motive behind her murder. During the investigation process, Eliza's lawyer, Gregory Moore, came under suspicion due to his behavior and involvement in the case. Eliza had voiced her concerns about Moore being rude, indifferent, and often late for crucial meetings and filings related to her case. The attorney-client relationship was fraught with tension, and Eliza's lack of trust in Moore became evident. However, despite the suspicions surrounding Moore, forensic analysis of his phone placed him nowhere near the crime scene at the time of the attack. The police had to look elsewhere for potential suspects. Another key figure in the investigation was Sanford Sherman, Eliza's estranged husband. The police discovered a web of complex financial transactions and concealed finances related to their divorce. Over $1 million had been transferred from their joint accounts to Sanford's private accounts, raising eyebrows about his financial motives. Disturbingly, Eliza had emailed herself expressing fear that Sanford might have her killed.
Never done anything like this before. I can only imagine what I look like with this cap on. It's gonna be my new Instagram profile picture.
I just know a little bit about EMFs. They are emitted from electronic devices.
I know that they stand for electromagnetic fields. I can't see it, so I don't always believe it, you know.
The one on the right there is what you look like after 10 minutes of having the phone up against your head with no area.
These emails provided insight into the troubled dynamics of their relationship and the dangers she felt she was facing. Additionally, Sanford's alleged involvement in illicit affairs and strip clubs raised concerns about his character and potential motives for wanting Eliza dead. His embezzlement of money from Eliza's accounts further incriminated him in the eyes of her family. Perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence was their daughter Jennifer Sherman's deposition against her father. Jennifer accused Sanford of embezzling around $2 million from her mother's accounts. A forensic accountant's investigation revealed that Sanford used the embezzled money for various expenses, including strip clubs and gifts and dates for his affair partners. The police developed a theory that Sanford might have paid off Gregory Moore to set a trap for Eliza. With a critical court hearing related to their divorce scheduled just 2 days before her murder, Sanford might have been deeply concerned about potential losses in the proceedings, or worried that his embezzlement might come to light. Despite mounting evidence against Sanford, a judge ruled that there was no concrete evidence indicating he was guilty of the crime, preventing the police from bringing criminal charges against him for Eliza's murder. To this day, the case remains unresolved, leaving Jennifer and her family devastated and without the closure they sought. Anyone with information about Eliza's murder can call Crime Stoppers of Cuyahoga County at 216-252-7463. Number 48. Dorothy Arnold. A well-known debutante in the late 19th century, Dorothy Arnold went missing on a typical afternoon stroll in the bustling city of New York, with no witnesses around to bring her mystery a close. Dorothy Arnold was born on July 1, 1885 in New York City. She was a socialite and heiress to a very wealthy family. The second child of 4, her father was a perfume importer by the name of Francis Rose Arnold, and her mother was Mary Martha Parks Arnold. All of her siblings grew up to marry wealthy or work in the import business, leading them to more money than they knew what to do with. Dorothy studied at the Felton School for Girls and then Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, where she studied literature. After graduating in 1905, Dorothy lived at the family home on 79th Street and attempted a career as a writer. In the spring of 1910, Dorothy submitted a piece to McClure's magazine, but it was rejected, and her friends and family often teased her about this, finding her aspirations amusing. Many of her future submissions were also rejected, and according to her friends, she was increasingly embarrassed about the lack of success. On the morning of December 12, 1910, Dorothy said to her mother she was off to buy a dress for her sister's upcoming debutante party. Her mother offered to go with her, but Dorothy was insistent on going alone. She left the family home around 11 a.m. with about $25 in cash on her, and walked to the Park and Tilford store on the corner of 5th Avenue and 59th Street. Around noon, Dorothy purchased about a half pound of chocolate, putting this on her account with the store, and then walked 22 blocks to Brentano's bookstore. Here she purchased a book and conversed with the clerk. None of the store employees she interacted with that day recalled anything unusual about her behavior. Outside the store, Dorothy ran into a friend named Gladys King, who remembers Dorothy being in good spirits at the time. Dorothy told Gladys she was going to walk home through Central Park and took off in that direction at around 2 p.m. By the early evening, Dorothy's family was expecting her to return home for dinner, but she didn't show. She never missed meals with her family, and they were worried when she didn't arrive. They called her friends, but no one had seen her. Just after midnight, one of Dorothy's friends called the house to see if she had returned, to which her mother said she had, but that Dorothy had already gone to bed with a bad headache. Fearing that their daughter's disappearance would cause a stir in the media, the family hid it. refusing to even report it to the police. They wanted to keep it out of the press in case Dorothy chose to return home in the coming days. Dorothy's family searched her room and found all of her belongings in place, aside from what she had taken to go shopping for the dress. Eventually, the family hired a private investigator who searched nearby hospitals, jails, and even marriage records, but found no sign of where Dorothy had gone. The private detective convinced the family to notify the police, and so they did. On January 25, 1911, Dorothy's father held a press conference wherein he informed the public of his missing daughter and asked for their assistance. During the investigation, reporters found out Dorothy had lied to her family before, telling them on occasion she was going out of town, but was actually spending time with a man named George Griscom, but he denied knowing anything about her whereabouts. There were some speculated sightings since her disappearance, and even one letter which showed up at the police station allegedly signed Dorothy that read, "I am safe." However, Dorothy's family never believed she really sent this letter. There is still no answer to what happened to Dorothy on her way home that day.
This is the tightest line.
I don't think so. No, 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 no. I don't think so. No, 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 no. It's never, ever, 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 ever gonna happen. I don't think so. No, 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 no. I don't think so. No, 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 no. It's never, ever, 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 ever gonna happen. I don't think so. No, 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 no.